Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Fabrizio Aiello. Welcome to What is Fabrizio Inking? And today I'm inking Horace H. Hoover. So currently I have a comic book called Horace H. Hoover from alternativecomics.com. It is a cult mystery adventure about a guy who wears a vacuum cleaner on his head, sort of like old school. Throwback with some modern twist to it. Check it out. So today I'm doing this drawing. So this is the blue line I have. This is Horace. This is Slurp and Max, his buddies that help him out in these cases. And then this very scary looking voodoo man in the background. So any questions, comments, throw them in chat. So I use Winsor Newton brushes, 2 and 3 depending. Depending on what they feel like. Hey Blake, how's it going? I know I've been jumping around on these inks, but I'm just basically going to make progress on each of them on and off. I think that's the best way to handle it. And I'm actually going to really take my time with this. Sometimes during streams I go a little faster than I normally would. It's just natural, but for this I might use this for a cover or a poster, so this is going to be a slower feel for sure. Got to make sure all the lines have a little bit of dynamic quality to them. I also printed the blue line pretty dark, so I didn't have to guess too much. A lot of times I'm redrawing when I'm inking, but sometimes you really want to be able to follow the original pencils. This one looks like it's going to be epic. Thank you. Yeah, this was a lot of fun to draw. I actually started the first version of this on a stream a little bit ago, and I had to go back to the drawing because it just wasn't right. I'm like, you know what? I don't want to rush it because I really liked the drawing, but I knew if I continued with the inks, I'd finish it and I just wouldn't be 100% happy with it. So I went back to the drawing and really polished it up. I added some trees in the back. I kind of reworked the characters a little bit, make them a little more dynamic. So I am excited about this one. And I will be following, like I said, my pencils a little closer than I usually do, so we'll see how that works out. I might actually run over and grab my glove. Whenever your palm slightly sticks to the paper, it can completely mess up like a really nice brush stroke that you have. So 1 second. Alrighty, I'm back. Hey Metatron's Cube, how's it going? Will you sell the first unfinished one? I wouldn't sell it. I'd give it away. Yeah, if people want the unfinished one, I'll totally just give that away. I usually don't like, I don't know, giving or selling things I'm not entirely happy with. Holy glare. But sometimes I think it's okay. I always wonder if I would have been a good inker, meaning inking other people's work, different styles, different subject matter. It definitely takes a certain skill set and mindset, and I don't know. I wonder about that. So this is going to be my attempt to ink myself as if I was given this job and these are somebody else's pencils. I know that sounds strange. But I've never approached any of my drawings that way yet, so. I mean, when you're penciling, there are lines that you intend to be sort of main structural lines, and then there are lines that you're making to get to that structural line. And I think that's the skill, is kind of figuring out which ones are which. Because if you accentuate the wrong one, it'll be pretty obvious, I think. There's always interpretation going on. That's why you get a lot of inkers that work with the same pencil, or at least they used to. I realize that doesn't really happen much anymore, but. But I would have always loved to see other inkers take a crack at some pencilers. You know, so instead of Scott Williams doing, virtually all of Jim Lee's stuff, what would it look like if Klaus did Jim Lee stuff? It would be a totally different feel. I forgot that I'm on camera. I don't know if that's weird or not. I'm giving it a whirl again. So about a week or so ago, I opened up an Etsy store. I used to, and I still do, occasionally do 3D resin models or little sculptures. During the auction last week, I had a Jacob Marley door knocker, and I had those essentially made a couple of years ago. It was before 2019, I think. So I decided to sort of break all those out and sell them. So I'll post a link if anybody's interested. There's a Jacob Marley door knocker, which I really love. Nobody at the auction really seemed to, but if you're into that kind of stuff, check it out. It's got like a bronze, like a faux bronze finish. There's a Nosferatu, sort of like, I call him Nosferatu too old for this shit. So he's like a geriatric Nosferatu. And there's Dagon, which is a pretty big, complex model kit, but it's really nice. Yeah, sometimes these one-off concept art pieces, they just immediately evoke something, and like the story just immediately starts. This is definitely one of those pieces with that character, this guy. I really loved him. So you just start to hear a voice, you start to kind of get a feel for the character. I try not to go too far into it, just because whenever the time comes, I would rather dig or do a deep dive when the time comes, as opposed to, it could be months or more before it's actually time. There's a little bit less excitement, as time goes on, so maybe that wears off by the time you get to the character. So I try not to do it too far in advance. John's Long Box, how's it going? Oh, I just got here. Can you erase that and start over? Yeah, I mean, of absolute course, I mean, in 2023, if I can't just magically do that, what's the point of life? Thanks for joining. I know in my tweet, I said I was going to be talking gossip. Fortunately, I don't know any, but I would if I had gossip. So it's technically not clickbait. I didn't say I had gossip. I said I would be talking about gossip, or I would be gossiping, but I don't have any, so Metatron's cube hype is only bad if the final product is down. It's true. I actually started working on another sculpt, so I'm doing Max. It's turning out pretty cool. I mean, Max is one of those characters where he's simple in a way compared to Horace or Slurp, but because of that, I like drawing and sculpting him, so it's turning out really nice so far. I might do that on a live stream. I'm not sure yet. It's kind of hard to tell what people want, if they want to see, you know, traditional 2D or 3D or both. I don't know. I do identify a little bit more with Max because he carries a knife. Just because it's very down to earth. He's not carrying some crazy gadget that Horace built for him or anything like that. He probably has a screwdriver in his back pocket just in case he needs it. Knives are earthy now? Well, I just mean compared to crazy, like, just crazy weird devices or something. It's normal, we'll say. It's very, you can go into a store and buy a knife. You can't buy some of the stuff that Horace might have in his pouches. Which we will see quite a bit more of that as time goes on, but I really gave Slurp a mouthful of janky teeth. I try to make them as asymmetric as possible without being too crazy. So normally I wouldn't actually do this. I wouldn't spend so much time on one area, but kind of digging it, so why not? Hey Mind Tunnel, how's it going? Congrats on the new subs. Thank you. Yeah, it's really fun seeing people subscribe to the channel. It's one of those deals where you just kind of, you don't think anybody's gonna notice or pick up. But yeah, I've definitely gotten more subscriptions, and a couple of live streams got like quite a bit of views, which has been really cool. So thanks everybody that's been checking stuff out and retweeting. Can't remember who was asking me about Slurp, and I said that Slurp is a good guy. That's Horace's friend, and they were just completely dumbfounded. They're like, that does not look like a good guy. Like, yeah, I guess you're right. But wouldn't you rather be friends with Nosferatu than enemies? I mean, or we'll call him a Nosferatu-like character. It would be interesting just to ink one character at a time. See how that works out one of these days. I've heard some approaches to inking comics. It's pretty interesting because from the beginning of the issue to the end, you know, you're constantly, I don't want to say progressing, because that implies that your end result is going to be a forward direction, because sometimes it's not. Some people regress. It's hard, but it does happen. But anyway, as you move through the comic book, you could potentially start drawing characters just slightly differently, you know, at the end, because you've drawn them 30 times, you know, and you start to get like a shorthand, and you start to handle them differently. And I remember somebody saying that they go through the entire book and draw and ink one particular character on every single page. Then they do that for the next character and the next character. That seemed kind of crazy to me. I would like to see what that looks like, though. At that point, you're not really treating each page like a piece of artwork that has its own competition or composition. And I mean, you can. Man, that's a lot harder, though. Because you need to see things in relation to other things to make decisions. Slurp is looking pretty good. Getting the basic stuff. So as far as like midtones and any texture type stuff, I will definitely save that until the end. So yeah, wearing this glove is a huge help. It kind of looks kind of dopey, but when you have to do long brush strokes, it lets your hand glide on the page. There have been times where I start a long brush stroke and it sticks just for a split second, and it'll ruin that. Alrighty. See, I'm going to move her to max now. Metatron's Cube. I've seen manga guys who only draw and ink the main characters, then hand it off to someone who fills all the backgrounds in for them. That would be interesting. That's a lot of faith to have in somebody, but I get it. You know, ultimately the characters are what your eye usually goes to, unless the background is like an integral scene, you know. But that's why they can crank out a lot, I guess. Assembly line. I've always had an issue with just the concept of the assembly line approach. Even the penciling, inking, coloring, lettering sort of artificial separation. I've never been a fan of that, and I understand why they did it, but obviously I want to have control over that, so that's why I'm doing it. John, they did that on Cerebus. I did hear that, yeah. I've never read Cerebus. Seen lots of really great art, but I've never read it. I've heard I should read it, though. And whenever I say I'm not a big fan of the assembly line stuff, I mean, I can't deny that that created some of the greatest comics of all time. So, you know. Is Frank Miller working with David Mazzucchelli the best version of Frank Miller? Or is it, Sin City and 300? Man, I don't know. It's just so different. It would feel cool to be on a team finishing all the cylinders, firing on all cylinders, though putting out crazy stuff. Yeah, I totally agree. Like I said, there's no doubt that you get the right team together and they're putting out the greatest comics we've ever seen. I've spent a week talking with David Sim on the phone, but he graciously said no about coming on the show. Whoa, that's crazy. Wow. That is cool. Man, you've had some really important comic book people on your channel in such a short time. It's crazy. So cool. Metatron, at least you're asking, though. Yeah, I mean, that's what you got to do. And it seems like a lot have been saying yes, so. Yeah, I don't know how long this is going to take. At least 3 or 4 hours is my guess. I will say this, if you nail the character design, everything else becomes a little bit easier. And with Horace, Max, and Slurp, am I saying I nailed the character design? I will say this: they are so distinct that there's never an issue about confusing one with the other, and because of that, it makes every job easier. From inking to coloring to just layouts and storytelling. I know that some people might consider their colors garish or a little psychedelic or extreme, but I can draw very, very tiny little versions of them in a big scene, and you can definitely tell who's who. And that just, again, that makes my life a lot easier. I was looking at, this is random, but I was looking at the Captain Britain costume design, character design, the original, which people might not agree, but I love the original Captain Britain design. To me, it's beautiful. The redesigned stuff that Alan Davis did is cool. Don't get me wrong. He looks more like a knight or something like that. But man, that original Captain Britain, always loved that. Metatron's cube. The silhouettes are very distinctive. Thank you. Yeah, it's funny because I think of Slurp as sort of a triangle, Horace as a rectangle, and then Max is basically a square. So that's my shorthand whenever I'm drawing them from a distance. Yeah, and not to go on and on about it, but once you get the silhouettes and the colors and the character design, everything is easier, from writing dialogue to figuring out their backgrounds to personality. It all flows from that original visual character design. I'm running out of room here. The other thing I get to do if I treat this like I'm just a sort of a paid inker is I can talk crap about the penciler. Like, what the hell were they doing over here? That makes no sense. That doesn't look like a hand. That's got to be the most fun part of being an inker. Ben, looking amazing. How comfortable are you feeling with the brush? Hey Ben, how's it going? I'm feeling pretty good. I came for the art, staying for the jazz. I kind of love jazz. I don't kind of love jazz. I love jazz. But I came to it pretty late in life. Yeah, I was into all sorts of music, but jazz was not one of them. And then I heard, trying to think of what I heard. I think I heard the Monk theme song, which is like a gypsy jazz tune. And I started doing some research about gypsy jazz, learned about that, which I loved. So I did a deep dive into gypsy jazz for a long time. And then that kind of led me to cool jazz and West Coast jazz and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, we should talk jazz then, John, because I definitely have, like, my playlist. I'm kind of picky, but, Chet Baker, yeah, for sure. Coltrane. Bill Evans, like, his early stuff is so good. I remember, wasn't too long ago, I was at my dentist office. I know this doesn't really apply to anything, but I'm at my dentist office, and we got to talking about jazz. And we found out we had similar taste. He plays guitar too, and he's like, "What kind of stuff you like?" He hadn't heard stuff that I did. I said, "You gotta burn some of that and bring it in. We'll listen to it." I'm like, "Okay." And he was really insistent on it. So I remember the one night I'm kind of gathering some jazz, and my wife Stacy comes home. She's like, "What are you doing?" And at that moment, I realized I'm making a mixtape for my dentist. And she's like, "You're what? Is there something I should know about?" But he did like my mixtape, so he plays it in his dentist office. I grew up on big band for my father. Yeah. Oh, Louis Prima. Yeah, that's fun stuff. Brushes just feel better too. I like nibs and all, but you feel it after long inking sessions pressing the nib. That is 100% true. I love nibs too, but man, you get that resistance, and it just feels like it. After a while, it gets on you. Where the brush is it's so pleasant. It glides and it's smooth, and you get the variation of line weight that you just can't get anywhere else. Yeah, Ben, back to your question about how comfortable I am with a brush. I was thinking about this, and I don't know if I mentioned it before. I was trying to think of when I first started using a brush. And I definitely think that I kind of dipped in and out, no pun intended, with brushes. But I was doing stuff back in like high school with a brush. I started with a pen and a nib, but even back then, I was doing watercolors, but then I would almost do drawings with watercolor. And this is before I knew that that's really how comics were made. I really didn't understand the technique. My art teacher didn't know. This is well before the internet. So early on, I didn't realize that the brush was the primary tool. It grooves the finger, yeah. Oh, I'm totally off the... It's definitely interesting just focusing on the characters like this. I can't remember last time I did it, but I don't know, it's just one of those deals where you change it up a little bit and then things either really work or they don't, and this seems to be working pretty well. Metatron's Cube. I hear a nib made from a feather is way softer, and saw a French guy using one, but you sort of have to make them at that point. That's interesting. I never thought about that before, but that makes sense. Yeah, that is pretty hardcore. I have to admit, I'm one of those people that loves the tools as well. Like, I've looked into making paint before and making paper and making ink. I love the idea of all that stuff, and it's doable. But then at that point, you're like, well, I should be drawing instead of grinding down burnt skulls to make ink. Or at least that's how I assume they make ink. I know they used to do stuff like that, but I don't think so anymore. Hey, Captain Goodnight, how's it going? Hope they have good restaurants here. What could you ever be talking about, Captain Goodnight? Where are you, where they don't have restaurants? Or good restaurants? Yeah, Metatron's Cube. If you have to make the nib from a feather, I mean, are you killing the bird too? Are you making the gun to kill the bird? Although that does all sound like fun, making that stuff. Ben, it took me a while before I found a nib that worked for me. Zebra makes one that has a lot of give, so you get good line weight variations, but I still prefer the brush. There are feathers at the beach. Oh, the beach. I am far away from a beach, that's for sure. Yeah, nibs are, like, they're unique to people. Like, I think I mentioned before, but I had tracked down and bought 100 nibs. These are the kind that Bernie Wrightson used for Frankenstein. I just wanted to, I wanted to use the same nib that he did, just to kind of get a feel for it. And now granted, this is 30 years, 40 years later. I couldn't get them to work. I washed them, I burnt them, I did everything I could, and I could not get these nibs to work well. It was unfortunately a chunk of money. It was completely wasted. I saw the guy make the quill. It was just 2 cuts at a specific angle and then split so the tip can splay out. I'll tell you what, though, that guy could probably make a pretty penny selling those if he doesn't already. How hot was the nib when you heated them? I tried everything. I tried just warm water, boiling water, soap and water, 409. I just never had an issue with nibs like that before. Because depending, they put coatings on them, and some of the nibs you could actually see oil. You know how oil will almost look like a rainbow. I don't know the name of it. It just has like a weird color to it. So I could see that there was actually oil on the nib. So I'm like, okay, I just have to clean it. And I don't know. Maybe they've been sitting in a drawer for 40 years, and that oil just wouldn't come off. Orange, blue, white, use flame. I used flame. I have like just a lighter. Now, granted, I have 100 of those nibs, and I probably, I don't know, I tested out 5 or 6. So, maybe a chunk of them were bad. I don't know. Yeah, I know I've tried a bunch of different things. I could be more methodical about it, though. It was just, at a certain point, I got really frustrated. I just said, screw this. And I was going to do it later on. My biggest issue was I never had that much problem with nibs before. And I think they were French. I can't remember the name offhand. It's online somewhere, because he did an interview where he talks about them. You know what, Metatron's Cube? I just realized something. You mentioned about selling or giving away that unfinished ink. I might have thrown that away. I have to double check. I just cleaned up my room the other day. I might have tossed it. I might not have. I don't know. So these tiny, tiny, tiny little matching like feathering. It's kind of my Brian Boland homage. Ever since I realized he does everything with a brush, I feel like I should try to do that tiny detail. Especially for clothing, because then you definitely have like a softness to it. Holy cow, it's almost 9 o'clock. Alrighty. Actually, I think this is a pretty good place to stop. Got quite a bit of slurp done, like the primary and like secondary shapes. I just have to do some real small texturing, a little bit of shading. Max is looking pretty good too, so he's well on his way. And then we got the rest here. You know what? I'll stop. Alrighty, so you know what? Before I stop, I'm gonna pull out the old drawing so you guys can see the difference. Hello? Yeah. So this was the original. I mean, it looks similar for sure, right? But there were really distinct... There were really distinct differences. Holy cow, why can't I get this thing going? That made me redo it. One is, if you just look at his pose and his hand, this is a little soft. This is a little muddled. The facial features aren't great. His face is kind of like smushed in a bit here. For Slurp, he's very stiff. Like if you look to see, like these lines are just really straight, as opposed to this just feels more organic. It feels more like cloth. And even for Max, like it's very stiff here, like all of this stuff. So I just kind of came in and just wanted to make it look more, feel more like cloth, have folds, just more organic. And then of course I added the trees in the background. And then as a little bit of a storytelling, I just put like this kind of old creepy church in the corner. So yeah, so it wasn't a complete redo, but I kind of knocked everything back with the kneaded eraser, and then was able to kind of fix it to the point where I liked it. Alrighty. Thank you. Yeah, I think overall it's just a better piece. I think it'll make for a better piece. Yeah, thanks everybody for popping in chat. I appreciate it. Metatron's Cube, I will double check about that inking. I am not sure, but I'll let you know. I'll post it or something. You can have it if you want to pay for shipping, honestly, if I can find it. And everybody else, I will talk to you later, and I'll be doing some more inking probably over the weekend. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good night.